My name is Adeline, 35 years old, currently living in Seattle. This morning I got a call from a law office. My parents are suing me for inheritance rights to the company they once ignored when I built it from nothing. They said I owe them, after 20 years without a single phone call. But I still remember clearly the day they took me into the Oregon mountains when I was 15, said we were going on a weekend camping trip, and then left me in the forest with just one bottle of water, 3 protein bars, and a scribbled note. Let's see how many days you survive. Have you ever been cast aside by your own blood as if you meant nothing? If you've ever felt betrayed by family, leave a comment below. Hit like if you've ever had to save yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear what happened next, because what came after that day, no one could have imagined. I remember exactly how dry my throat felt when the sunlight of the third day began burning down on my shoulders. My jeans had torn at the knees the day before after I tripped over a root sticking out of the rocky path. My sneakers, which had been new just days earlier, were soaked in mud and falling apart at the heels. I pushed through each step, hungry, exhausted, and too scared to stop. That first night, I curled up behind a rotting tree, hugging my knees, every sound in the forest rumbling like a monster's growl. On the second night, I found a small crevice beneath a boulder, just big enough to lie on my side. I drifted in and out of sleep, heart pounding each time an owl hooted. I didn't cry, there were no tears left. Only one thought kept spinning in my head: they really left me. They weren't coming back. I started hallucinating water. At one point I thought I saw a stream, but when I ran to it, it was only sunlight glinting off stone. My stomach cramped over and over, but what hurt worse was the betrayal, an invisible pain that throbbed deep like a blade under the skin. On the morning of the third day, I stumbled around a bend in the trail and saw 2 figures in the distance. At first, I thought it was another illusion, but when I called out softly, one of them, a silver-haired man around 70, turned toward me. "Oh my God," he said, quickly walking toward me. "Carolyn, over here." I stood frozen, afraid that if I moved, they would vanish. The woman beside him, gray hair, glasses, petite frame, rushed over, her eyes filled with concern. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Are you lost?" she asked gently. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My lips were cracked, throat so raw it felt like a knife was stuck in it. All I could do was nod slightly. Walter took a water bottle from his backpack and handed it to me. I drank it in tiny sips, the cold liquid spreading through my chest like medicine. Carolyn handed me a nutrition bar, then laid her coat on the ground for me to sit. "What's your name?" Walter asked after a few minutes. "Adeline," I whispered. "How old are you?" 15. Carolyn glanced at him, then turned back to me, voice low. "Where are your parents?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "They left me 3 days ago." They were silent. But in their eyes I didn't see doubt. I saw something far rarer: belief. No need for explanations. They understood. They helped me out of the forest. It took over 2 hours to get back to the nearest parking area. Carolyn kept her hand on my back the whole way, as if to make sure I was still there. Walter chatted as we walked, telling me he used to be a math teacher, retired, bought an RV with his wife, and now they traveled around the US. They'd only planned a 2-day hike. Never expected to find someone like me. At the ranger station, they called the police right away. I was taken to a small room in the back with a soft couch and a water cooler. I told them everything, from the moment we left home to when I realized I was alone. An officer named Mark dialed the number I gave him, my mother's. I sat still, listening from across the room, and I'll never forget the look on his face after the call. She said, "Officer Mark told me, you ran off with a boyfriend. They assumed you were in another city with some teenage guy." She said she didn't expect you to act this dramatically. I didn't react. Just stared at the floor. Not surprised. It couldn't hurt more than it already had. Walter stood. "I don't believe that for a second. We found this girl in the woods. Exhausted, starving, dehydrated. If this was some runaway plan, no one would do it like this." Carolyn held my hand tightly. "If there's any way, we want to take her in. We can't let her go back to that." I looked up at her. It was the first time someone stood up for me without needing anything in return. But a few days later, social services arrived. They explained clearly. State law didn't allow an older couple, unrelated by blood and without going through a formal review process, to adopt a teenager on short notice. I was transferred to a foster facility nearly an hour away. Carolyn hugged me tightly at goodbye and whispered, "If there's ever a way to find you again, we will." I didn't reply. Just nodded. Her hand brushed gently through my hair one last time. On the bus, I stared out the window. The forest faded. The mountains turned into scattered homes. Every mile felt like a root of the past being torn from the ground. I didn't know where I was headed. But I knew one thing for certain. I didn't belong to where I came from. And I would never go back. I began a new life with a new name, Adeline Hayes. It wasn't the name my birth parents gave me. It was the name I chose for myself. A name that carried no pain, no ties to those who treated me like something to cast off. They may have erased me, but they no longer had the right to define who I was. The group home I was transferred to was an L-shaped building painted pale gray, old and cold even in summer. Inside were bunk beds, peeling wallpaper, and the lingering smell of bleach. I was assigned to a room with two older girls, Riley and Monica, neither of them particularly kind. That very first night I understood. In this place you learn to stand alone. "Look at this," Riley sneered, eyeing me up and down. "Don't touch any of my stuff." Monica stayed silent, but her gaze was sharp like a knife. I quietly placed my small bag, just a few old clothes and the journal I had carried from the woods, on the lower shelf and sat silently on the edge of the bed. I didn't speak. There was no need to. In the days that followed, I learned the unspoken rules. Show no emotion, never share personal details, always watch your back. My jacket went missing, someone poured water in my shoes. Once I was locked in the supply closet after dinner. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just remembered, every face, every word, every moment, as if one day I'd need them all to rewrite who I was. When I turned 18, I aged out of the system. They handed me a duffel bag and a referral sheet to a local employment center. No one asked where I would live. No one cared if I had money for food. I walked out of the worn-down gate of the group home with one resolve: never look back. I slept in an old pickup truck parked near an empty lot behind a gas station, where I got a job cleaning floors and pumping gas during night shifts. The owner, Frank, was in his 50s, a quiet man from the West who rarely spoke but always treated me decently. One night around 2 a.m. he found me still reading a worn-out book. "What are you studying, girl?" he asked. I looked up, fingers still marking the page. "Programming," I said. "I borrowed it from the library." He raised an eyebrow. "Really? I thought you were prepping for the SAT or something." I shook my head. "I'm not applying to college. I want to write software." Frank chuckled. "That takes guts. But let me tell you, what you've got, some kids with degrees don't even come close." That saying stayed with me over the following years. I worked during the day. I studied at night. Some nights were so cold my fingers stiffened, yet I kept typing on the old laptop I bought from a thrift store for $130. The internet was spotty, the software outdated, but I still painstakingly figured out every line of code, every concept. I sent job applications to dozens of companies. 82 times I was rejected. Some didn't respond at all. Others said bluntly, lacking the necessary degree. One company even called just to say, "Your cover letter was touching, but not enough to convince the tech panel." I kept going. Not because I thought I was special, but because I had no way back. I had been left behind once and I swore no one would get the chance to do that again. On the 83rd try, I received an email from a small startup in Portland called Brightbit Solutions. They were looking for someone to test an internal data management model, a project with limited funding but requiring patience, flexibility, and a willingness to learn through trial and error. The interview took place over Zoom. The founder, Ethan Clark, was just a few years older than me. After a few questions about data structures, he asked, "Can you tell me about a time you solved a problem you initially didn't understand?" I paused for a moment. Then I told him about the 3 days in the forest. No map, no phone signal, no rescue. I explained how I used the sun's shadow to find direction and recalled my 8th grade geography lessons to find my way back to the ranger station. Ethan looked at me silently for a few seconds. "You start on Monday," he said. "I think my team will learn a lot from you." I nodded, thanked him with a low but steady voice. After that call, I sat quietly in my car watching the afternoon light spill across the windshield, feeling a strange but familiar sensation. No one gave me a chance, I created it myself. I clearly remember the day I pitched my idea in a small room smelling of stale coffee and scattered keyboard clicks. I had spent the last 6 months building the first data model for an elderly care platform based on behavioral analysis technology, called LumaCare. The idea started during a night shift at the gas station, when I saw an elderly man lost and trembling, searching for medicine for his wife. I wondered, what if there was a gentle monitoring system smart enough to support them without taking away their independence? Ethan, who had hired me at Brightbit, listened to my presentation nodding quietly. But the strongest reaction came from the new CEO the company had just hired, Darren Keane. He was the kind of man with a slick smile, warm words, but eyes cold as stone. Hayes, he said after the presentation, if this idea takes shape, you won't just change how we care for the elderly. You might change the whole industry. I couldn't hide my smile. Every sleepless night, every line of trial and error code, every rejection, had led to that moment. What followed was a series of days working 16 hours each. I woke up with system diagrams in my head and fell asleep at the keyboard. I didn't care about the paycheck. I wanted to see the system work. I wanted to see an old woman get the right medicine at the right time without mistakes. I wanted to see their children feel peace of mind when not nearby. I wanted to see what I once yearned for, someone who truly cares. The project started attracting attention. A few small partners contacted me asking to trial the demo. I was invited to 2 tech conferences that year. I didn't take the stage, but my name was in the internal newsletter, and I was allowed to present to guest groups. One day, Darren called me to his office on the 14th floor. I think it's time for you to step back a little, Adeline, he said, his voice soft as the breeze. We're negotiating with a big investment fund. They want a more reputable face to represent the project. I was stunned. I can no longer continue working on LumaCare. No, not exactly, he smiled, leaning on the desk. You're still the tech lead. But on paper, ownership will be transferred to the company. You're an employee. Your idea, developed thanks to our resources. We should move forward together, but you must understand the rules of the game. I left his office without a word. I went straight to the server room, printed out the entire work history, version logs, technical email exchanges, everything proving I was the first to conceive LumaCare. Then I went home, wiped my personal hard drive clean, and the next day submitted my resignation. Ethan found me in the parking lot, eyes hesitant. You don't have to leave like this. I know Darren plays dirty, but if you stay... I cut him off. You don't get it, Ethan. This isn't just an idea. This is the answer to my life. And if I let it fall into others' hands just because they have higher titles, then everything I've endured means nothing. I started over. No office. No investment fund. Just me and a rented room behind the train station. I sat among piles of drafts, redrawing the system architecture. I named it ElderCore, a simple, solid name that sounded like a pillar. At first, there were only a few small clients, a nursing home in Tacoma, a rehabilitation center in Eugene. I called them myself, demoed the product via Zoom, and tweaked code every night based on real feedback. There were months I couldn't pay rent, sleeping on the office floor with a rolled-up mattress. But the clients didn't abandon me. They saw clearly that I truly cared about the elderly, not just for profit. They felt it in every call, every midnight software update I sent. 3 years later, ElderCore was present in 8 states. We developed a memory care module for Alzheimer's patients, integrated safety sensors, and an automatic alert system. I didn't need much introduction. Existing users referred new ones. And all ownership was in my name. I didn't need Darren Keane. I didn't need anyone representing me anymore. I stood tall with the real name I chose, Adeline Hayes. I never imagined my old name could come back like a thin, cold, sharp blade. That day, while preparing documents for the third quarter shareholders meeting, just impressive numbers. ElderCore had just signed contracts with 2 large nursing systems in Texas and Arizona, and the company's valuation hit $180 million. In an internal email, advisors suggested expanding into the Canadian market. I nodded, agreed, and thought quietly, it's time to buy back the old nursing home in Bend, where I once did the first pilot test. I didn't expect, when I stepped into the meeting room, that the first thing I'd see wasn't charts or reports, but him. Robert Monroe, the man I'd called Dad for the first 15 years of my life, sat right in the guest row, wearing a neat gray suit and a dark green tie, a formal smile on his lips as if he were a high-level investor who just flew in from Boston. Beside him was Lucille Monroe, the woman whose eyes I learned to avoid. Her hand rested lightly on a brown leather handbag, her face carefully made up, eyes gleaming with a familiar confidence, the belief that the world would forgive them again as always before. I froze at the door for a few seconds. One of the assistants, mistaking my surprise for a reaction to a new investor, whispered in my ear, "They claim to be direct relatives with rights to attend under state law." I nodded slightly, then entered, keeping a calm expression. But my heart was not at peace. Each step on the thick carpet felt like walking back down the gravel road years ago, through the Oregon forest, when they left me with a bottle of water and a scribbled and signed note. I didn't forget. I just learned to live without letting it tear me apart any further. When the meeting began, I presented the updates. My voice was steady, hands not trembling, every word precise like a coder typing lines of code. But I knew their eyes never left me for a second. Lucille took notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Robert smiled every time I paused in my presentation. When the special shareholder comments section opened, he stood up, took a stack of papers from his briefcase, and walked to the center of the room as if that stage was his. "My name is Robert Monroe," he said, his voice loud enough, clear and dignified. "My wife Lucille and I are the biological parents of Ms. Adeline Hayes, born Charlotte Monroe." The meeting room fell silent. Some eyes turned toward me, some eyebrows furrowed among the legal advisors. I did not lower my gaze. I only tightened my grip on the pen in my hand. Robert continued, "Based on the property and blood relation laws currently in effect in the state of Washington, we are here to clarify financial rights regarding the company our biological daughter is running. We do not wish to litigate, only to seek a fair and reasonable resolution." Lucille looked up, her face bearing a mild, appropriate sadness. "She doesn't need to feel gratitude. But she should know she is family. And everything she has today, we laid the foundation from the start." One of the company's legal team looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I just nodded slightly, signaling them to sit down. Then I stood and stepped to the center of the room. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "I'm sorry if you feel entitled to interfere in Eldercore's affairs. But this company was built since 2018 entirely with my personal assets, with no financial contribution or ties from my birth family. Also, my current legal name has been confirmed by court and federal attorneys for many years." I turned to the shareholders. "We will handle this according to procedure. All documents and evidence, if necessary, will be referred to the legal department after this meeting." No one objected. But I knew this was not the end. And I was right. After the meeting, as people gradually left the room, Robert stood blocking the exit. "Charlotte," he said, using that old name like a blade stabbing my memory. "We should talk." I looked straight at him. "You should call a lawyer if you want to talk about anything legally relevant." Lucille interrupted, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "We are not villains. But you owe us your existence." I replied, "No, I owe this life to myself, because you too abandoned it when I was 15. I walked past them without looking back. Behind me, I heard Robert whisper, "You think you can get away? You're my child. You owe me everything." I did not respond. But in my head only one thing echoed. This is my battlefield. And I will not back down. News began leaking just 3 days after the shareholder meeting. It started with a short article on a tabloid website in Utah titled, "Wealthy Female CEO Abandons Elderly Parents." They quoted Robert Monroe saying I suddenly changed my name, denied my roots, and forbade parents from contact for fear of company image damage. I read it quietly, not surprised, only feeling my chest tighten from that old familiar scent I once lived with. Manipulation cloaked in morality. One day later, the story appeared on a local TV station in Georgia, a state I never lived in. They showed an old blurry photo of me, about 11 years old, messy hair, wearing a wrinkled shirt, standing beside Robert at a family picnic. Lucille appeared in a short interview, dabbing tears with a handkerchief. "We just want the girl to remember she didn't grow up from nothing. Everything she has today began from the love of a family." That's when I knew they had begun a battle not only against me but against everything I built. I walked into the internal communications office, where the PR team hurriedly posted media warnings on the electronic board. Natalie, the communications director, pushed her glasses up her nose and looked at me with a hoarse voice. Adeline, the situation is not good. We received over 200 negative comments within 4 hours. Some investors are hesitating. Which partners? I asked. Sanvia Tech delayed contract signing. Brightwell requested verification on family relations. Some clients also emailed asking for clarification. I nodded, keeping calm. No response for now. I want to assess the real spread. But I couldn't keep everything under control. The next day, a group claiming to be internal relatives, I didn't even recognize their faces, simultaneously posted on social media. A woman named Janice Monroe wrote, "Charlotte was deeply loved. She was the first grandchild of the family. We used to throw birthday parties for her. I don't understand how she could be so heartless now." The post spread quickly. Underneath, some cursed me as a traitor. Others said I only use pain as a trick to make money. I sat in my office, the screen before me blurred with hundreds of nameless lines. Every time I read a lie, memories of hunger, cold, and owl cries in the forest resurfaced like an unhealed wound bleeding again. Jenny, my assistant, stepped in holding a stack of papers. "Adeline, I just received a handwritten letter. No sender address." I opened it. A sheet printed with simple words, "Ungrateful children deserve to lose everything." Alongside was a photo of Eldercore's office with red spray paint on the glass. Fake. I sat still for a few seconds. Not fear, but a cold feeling deep in my bones. They were willing to pull me down at any cost. That night, I got a call from Ethan, a former colleague who knew what I went through at Brightbit. "I saw the news," he said in a low voice. "Are you okay?" "I'm still alive," I replied briefly. "Adeline, is it true? They left you at 15? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Do you think I'd make up a story about sleeping 3 nights in the woods just to deny calling those 2 parents? He was silent, then said gently, "I believe you. It's just, the media won't side with the truth." "I know," I answered. "But this time I won't stay silent." I entered the new day with my head held high, despite more calls from company lawyers than work emails. Every accusation came with a decision to make. And I understood that to survive this storm, I not only had to prove I was right, I had to tell the whole truth they tried to bury for 20 years. I sat in the small meeting room of the communications team, soft light from a desk lamp illuminating files spread across the table. The police report from the day I was found, scanned pages of notes I wrote with my childish handwriting, a few black and white photos of bruises when I was first brought out of the forest. On the large screen ahead, the program's logo appeared in a simple font, "Surviving at 15." I didn't want to tell this story just to defend myself. I wanted the public to understand what it means to be left behind by those who should protect you. I wanted anyone ever pushed aside by family, ever treated like a shadow in their own home to feel spoken for. Natalie handed me a coffee, whispering, "The shoot starts at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Carolyn confirmed she'll be there on time." I nodded. Carolyn, the woman who led me out of the forest, wrapping a wool scarf around my shoulders during that summer chill, still lived in Bend with her husband. When I called her, she only said one sentence, "If it's for the truth, you don't have to convince me." That night I barely slept. I reopened my old journal, the pages yellowed, some smeared with tear stains. I reread the entry I wrote in the emergency care room. "I don't need anyone to believe me. I just need to survive until no one can deny it." The filming was held in a small studio in Seattle. I arrived early and sat quietly in the makeup room, hearing the soft footsteps of the crew outside. When Carolyn walked in, I stood up. She said nothing, just hugged me gently but firmly, as if still trying to hold on to a little girl not to be swept away by the wind. We filmed for 3 hours. I spoke without pause about the 3 days lost in the forest, the injury on my ankle, the cold gaze of the officer when I told him my parents had left me. Carolyn confirmed every detail. She presented a copy of the thank you letter from the police department to the 2 people who found and saved the abandoned teenager. I played the recorded statement I gave 19 years ago, taken from archived records. Nothing I said needed embellishment. The truth was enough. The first broadcast aired during prime time. We purchased local TV airtime while simultaneously streaming on Eldercore's platform with a simple opening line, Some children get lost. Some are intentionally left behind. This is one of them. Responses came immediately after the broadcast. The company inbox flooded with thank you messages. A man named George wrote, "My daughter went through something similar but didn't have the courage to speak out. Today, thanks to you, she sat down and told everything." An elderly woman from Wisconsin sent a handwritten letter, her shaky but clear handwriting. "If I still had strength, I would hold you like the granddaughter I never had." National television stations started reaching out. They wanted to rerun the program and invite me to participate in panels about recovery from domestic abuse. A major newspaper in California wrote an editorial titled, "When Silence is No Longer an Option." Most remarkable was the media shift. Those who had criticized me began to fall silent. Some quietly deleted their posts. Others publicly apologized under my original post where I had written briefly, "Family isn't just blood. Family is where you are never left behind." And Robert, Lucille. They gave no public response in the 2 weeks after the show aired. But I knew their silence wasn't acceptance. It was an undercurrent and I was prepared. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it to stop the storm they tried to unleash on my life. And if necessary, I would continue standing firm in its eye. I opened my laptop one early autumn morning, when dew still clung outside the window and the coffee in my hand was still hot. Among hundreds of emails sent after the documentary aired, one subject line made me hold my breath for a few seconds. "My name is Hannah Monroe. If you are Charlotte, then you have a biological sister." I read that line over and over, each word squeezing my chest. Hannah. A name that existed in my memory like a faint shadow. A black-haired girl, often smiling, who disappeared from my life when I was 7. When I asked my mother, she only said that she was sent to live with our grandmother in the East. After that, Hannah's name vanished from every family story as if she never existed. I believed I had imagined Hannah. The email was nearly 3 pages long. Hannah wrote that she was sent to a foster family at 10 years old in a secret, rushed procedure so quick there were no official records linked to her original name. The new family was told her birth parents had died in a car accident. "Since leaving, I wasn't allowed to ask any more questions," she wrote. "Every letter sent to the old address got no reply. Only this year did I find old medical records at a local clinic showing my birth name as Hannah Monroe, and that my previous legal guardians were Robert and Lucille Monroe." I sat motionless for a long time. Every line Hannah wrote was a missing piece of a truth I never dared to fully face. I was not the only one abandoned. They did it once. Then did it again. We had a video call that night. When the screen lit up, I saw a woman in her 30s, long curly hair tied back, a face strangely similar to mine, but with different eyes. They carried experience and guarded caution, the kind I see in the mirror every day. Hannah looked at me for a long moment, then smiled softly, both happy and shy. "You really are Charlotte," she said, shaking her head. "I'm still not used to calling you Adeline." I smiled lightly. "I don't remember you clearly, but I remember someone holding me during a thunderstorm. Maybe that was you." "Probably me," she whispered. The story unfolded piece by piece. Hannah told me our mother always hated her straightforwardness and determination. Whenever she argued, our mother called it rebellion, breaking the family mold. When Dad showed support, Mom began saying Hannah was not pure blood, that she was the result of a medical mistake and should be cleansed from the bloodline. At the time, she didn't fully understand. But later, as she grew up and looked back, she realized it was deep, toxic jealousy and the motive for being secretly taken away from the family. There was a time Mom coldly said to me, "There are children born who don't fit the house. They must be removed before it's too late." I sat frozen, my whole body stiff. Every word Hannah spoke took me back to the moment I was left in the forest, the way they looked at me from the car before driving away. No pity, no regret. Just a prepared severance. Hannah ended the call with a sentence I'll never forget. "You're not alone." They didn't just abandon me. They abandoned anyone who wasn't like them. The next morning, I forwarded all emails, call recordings, and copies of Hannah's medical records to my lawyer, David. He silently read through them, then said softly, "This could be the most important witness we have. And she's clearly a victim as well." I nodded. Not just to prepare for the lawsuit, but because from that moment I realized I was no longer the missing piece. Hannah was the memory they tried to erase, and I was proof they failed. And the truth, no matter how many years they tried to hide it, would always find its way back. Courtroom number 4 at King County Courthouse was silent as I stepped in. Everything felt wrapped in a thick atmosphere of anticipation and caution. Outside it was drizzling, but inside the chill wasn't from the weather. It came from the eyes of those who once called me daughter. I sat in the defendant's chair between my two lawyers. On the table lay thick files, each page marked with colored tabs. The 2006 police report, copies of Hannah's journal, Carolyn's testimony, photos of original recorded calls from the public phone near Bend on the afternoon I was left behind. Judge Elliot Ramsey was a silver-haired man, stern, experienced in handling major civil cases in the state. He glanced at both lawyers, his voice sharp. Today's case is special in nature. Filming is prohibited, but minutes will be public record. Both parties have the right to present arguments in turn. On the plaintiff's side, Robert and Lucille Monroe sat together, their faces hard as stone. Their attorney, Kendall Price, spoke clearly. My clients, the biological parents of Ms. Adeline Hayes, believe they were unjustly rejected by their daughter, causing long-term emotional and financial damage. We request the court to apply filial responsibility laws given the urgent context. David, my lawyer, did not immediately rebut. Calmly, he opened a file, pulling out a large copy of the missing persons report filed by Oregon police when I was 15. He pointed to Lucille's statement. My daughter ran off with a boyfriend, no search needed. David looked up at the judge directly. We have clear evidence showing my client did not run away but was deliberately abandoned in the Cascade Head National Forest. She was later rescued and handed over to police by a couple of strangers. The judge raised an eyebrow. And does your client have any third-party confirmations? David nodded and pulled out a USB drive. We have a video testimony from Carolyn Briggs, the direct witness who brought Adeline to the ranger station and reported the incident. We ask permission to play it now. The screen lit up. Carolyn appeared in a still frame, her voice slow and emotional. When I found the girl, she was curled up by a tree root, pale-faced, clutching an empty water bottle. She didn't cry, just looked at me as if she couldn't believe someone would actually take her out of there. No one in the room said a word. Lucille's gaze suddenly shifted downward to the table. David continued, pulling out Hannah's journal, a notarized copy. We present excerpts from the personal diary of Hannah Monroe, my client's biological sister, who was taken away without just cause at the age of 10. She clearly wrote, and I asked permission to read. Mother said I polluted the family bloodline. She said once children disobey, they don't deserve to exist in this house anymore. A few murmurs rose from the back row. The judge signaled for silence. Lucille bit her lip and Robert turned his face away. David spoke on, his voice controlled but with unmistakable anger. My client was abandoned, defamed in the media, sued by the very people who inflicted the deepest scars on her life. And when she stood up and built something for herself, they came back, not to apologize but to claim a share. Kendall stood up to object, but the judge raised his hand to stop her. He frowned, flipping through the documents before him. We have reviewed all materials. The plaintiffs have failed to provide any medical, financial, or legal evidence proving they supported the defendant past her minority. Conversely, documents from the defense reveal prolonged neglect, deliberate misinformation, and signs of media manipulation. He looked up, voice firm. The court dismisses all claims from the plaintiffs. All related legal costs will be borne by the plaintiffs. This trial is adjourned. I didn't exhale immediately. My whole body went rigid. But when the gavel struck, a crisp sound breaking the silence, I felt some relief. Not because of victory, but because the truth was finally no longer buried. Robert and Lucille left the courtroom without a word. But I knew from that day forward, they would no longer wield the title of parents to harm me again. And although they didn't lose anything materially right away, they lost everything that could have been called honor. And for me that was enough. I drove along the familiar mountain road, where rows of pines still stood silent as ever, their branches stretching and intertwining overhead to form a deep green canopy. Though parts of the road had been repaved, every curve still carried the quiet feeling of a time I couldn't name. My GPS led me to the spot I saved from the previous year, where I had quietly researched national park records and retrieved the old coordinates. I pulled over at the roadside, opened the trunk, and took out a thin wooden plaque I carved myself in the garage. I was not left behind. I survived. I crossed the trail, weeds grown thick on both sides, the breeze carrying the scent of pine resin and damp earth. Beneath the largest pine, the place where I sat for 3 days, clutching an empty water bottle with bloodied legs, I knelt, placed the plaque on the ground, then gently touched the rough bark. Not to blame. Not to reopen. I just wanted to leave something, for other children who might accidentally find this place, for my 15-year-old self, and for those unnamed wounds. That afternoon, as the sun lowered and bathed the mountain slope in golden light, I called Carolyn. She answered after the second ring. "I'm back," I said, voice slightly choked. She was silent a moment, then asked, "Bend?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "That forest. Where you found me. Much quieter now." "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Better than ever," I replied. "I want to invite you to dinner. To my house. No cameras, no staff. Just you and me." I heard a soft laugh on the other end. "Then I'll bring apple pie. I still have the old recipe, but with a little cinnamon added." "Perfect," I smiled. "This time I'll cook. Don't expect anything fancy, but it'll be clean and warm." 3 days later, Carolyn showed up at my door. The house on the hill overlooking Union Lake, the home I chose when Eldercore reached its first solid milestone. She wore a gray wool coat, carrying a basket of pies and a bottle of homemade grape wine. I led her into the kitchen, the scent of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filling the air. We sat across from each other, speaking little, but every gesture full of unspoken meaning. As she sliced the apple pie and I poured hot tea, she looked at me kindly. "Adeline, you've come so far. I'm incredibly proud." I placed my hand over hers, thin fingers still warm like the day she wrapped a wool scarf around my shoulders at the ranger station. "Without you, I'm not sure I'd still be here." "You've always been here," she said softly. "You just hadn't yet seen yourself." That night, as I saw her off at the car, I watched the taillights fade around the bend. In my hand was the small note she left in the pie basket. "Family isn't those who gave you life. It's those who stay when you think no one will." I tucked the note into the drawer beside my bed. In a world that once turned its back on me, I found someone who didn't walk away. And for me, that was home. Looking back on the journey, I don't see myself as a victim. I see a child once lost in the forest who now knows where she stands. I don't live for revenge, nor do I need forgiveness. I live to prove that sometimes, we have to become our own safe harbor. What about you? Have you ever experienced feeling abandoned or misunderstood by those closest to you? Do you believe family is what we're born into or what we build through trust and choice? I'd love to hear your thoughts after listening to this story. Please share your own experiences in the comments, because maybe what you say will comfort someone going through the same. If this story touched something inside you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying me through the next journeys. Pieces of life where family isn't always a safe place, but can also be where kindness and understanding begin again.